Tonight on Ukraine Today, Christmas shelling. What weapons did Russian occupiers use and where did they strike on Christmas night? Everything for war. Which sectors of Russia's economy are funding the killing of peaceful Ukrainian civilians? Bleeding the occupiers' army dry. How China and India are bringing Ukraine's victory closer. Imperialism and NATO. In the United States, transcripts of conversations between Putin and George W. Bush from 2001 were released. All this and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit the like button and let's move on to the news. Today, the Christian world celebrates Christmas, a holiday of hope and salvation. For Ukraine, this is already the third Christmas during a full-scale invasion and the 11th Christmas during a war launched against us by Russia and imposed on us by the Kremlin regime. This time, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky recorded his traditional, almost daily address in a Christmas style.
We mark Christmas in a very difficult time. Sadly, not all of us are at home tonight, and sadly, not everyone has a home, and sadly, not everyone is with us today. But despite all the troubles that Russia has brought, it is not able to occupy or bomb the most important thing. This is our Ukrainian heart, this is our faith in one another, and this is our unity.
The occupiers decided to remind everyone who they really are, even on Christmas night. Russian forces struck naval port and industrial infrastructure in the Odessa region. One person was killed. Two others were wounded. In Odessa, attacks on energy facilities caused power outages and disruption in water supply in several districts. In Cherkasy, Russians attacked a city cemetery. Gravestones were damaged, including the Alley of Heroes. During the day, a Russian Shahed drone hit a residential apartment building in Chernihiv. One person was killed, 5 others were wounded, including children. This is what it means to celebrate Christmas when your neighbor is Russia. Ukraine's response did not take long. Ukrainian drones struck the port of Temryuk in Russia's Krasnodar region. 2 fuel storage tanks are on fire there. Explosions were also reported at a gas processing plant in Orenburg. Its operations have been suspended. Later, strikes hit the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery in Russia's Rostov region. Storm Shadow missiles were used. Ukraine's defense forces improved their tactical position on one of the hottest frontline directions, the Pokrovsk axis. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian troops carried out a successful counterattack. At the same time, Russian forces made some gains on the Zaporizhzhia direction. More details from the battlefield in the report.
The Ukrainian Defense Forces have withdrawn from Seversk. This information has been officially confirmed by the General Staff. To preserve the lives of Ukrainian soldiers, the units were pulled back to western positions. The city remains under the fire control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Analysts had been acknowledging for several weeks that the fall of Seversk was only a matter of time. The Russians, despite suffering enormous losses, are not experiencing a shortage of manpower and have been pressing the city from both the north and the south. As expected, the Bakhmut River did not become a line that could significantly hinder the occupiers' advance for long. Between sending reserves to support the defense of Seversk or Kupiansk, the General Staff quite logically chose the latter.
Kupiansk is a significantly important city. Kupiansk is much more important for our defense than Seversk. Seversk, apart from the fact that it has been holding the line since 2022, no longer plays an important logistical role. And this isn't just some blanket propaganda to say, well, we lost it, so be it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the city of Seversk is completely destroyed. It hasn't been a place where Ukrainian servicemen could be stationed for a long time now. I remember even back in 2022, Su-25 aircraft would fly in here and drop bombs, and then Wagner forces as well, so it's been completely destroyed. And even when Bilohorivka was still holding out and the defense of Verkhnyokamyansk continued, our troops would just pass through Seversk in transit.
The capture of Seversk gives the occupiers a tactical advantage and the opportunity to open up another route to put pressure on the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration.
Along with Seversk, the window of opportunity to hold on to Yampil will most likely close as well. This location will also be lost in the near future. Also, most likely, what the Russians will try to do is to level the front here with renewed force by putting pressure on Lyman. Because troops will be freed up, a section of the front will be released, and the enemy will have additional forces to put pressure on Lyman. Because if they move further towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk without resolving the issue with Lyman, it doesn't matter.
Meanwhile, the Skala Regiment showed how American Abrams tanks were used for the first time on the Pokrovsk front. They provided cover for assault groups in Pokrovsk.
We knew that the road was mined. FPV Zhduni were sitting along the road. There were also PTM-type mines, but we took these nuances into account. An armored BTR with a specialized mine roller was steadily moving ahead and performing its crucial task, effectively crushing and thoroughly clearing all of it in its path.
The Abrams tank played a major role in this operation, providing solid and reliable cover for our infantry who dismounted and did their job. There was also support from our BMPs. The enemy did not expect us to drive right up to the very houses that we needed to clear and secure.
Meanwhile, the Russians claimed that the Vostok group had expanded its bridgehead on the western bank of the Haicha River at the junction of the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The occupiers report the capture of 9 square kilometers, including the settlement of Zarekne, as well as control over a section of the road connecting Bratsky and Ternovate. Meanwhile, deep state analysts have placed the village of Rabovsky in Sumy region, which is just a few hundred meters from the Russian border, into the red zone, although Ukrainian military-related public channels report that fighting for this territory is still ongoing. The Russians are hiding in the homes of Ukrainians who were forcibly deported to Russian territory the day before. Another danger highlighted by military communications expert Serhiy Flesh is the attack by Russian Shaheds on the railway in Zhytomyr region. Most likely, the occupiers launched the UAVs from Belarusian territory. Therefore, the Belarusian-Ukrainian border could become another direction for Russian terrorist attacks.
Over the past day, Russia lost at least 860 occupiers killed and wounded. That brings total Russian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,201,230 troops. In the last 24 hours alone, Ukraine's defense forces also destroyed 7 Russian tanks, 5 armored combat vehicles, 59 artillery systems and dozens of other enemy military equipment. Ukraine is taking Crimea back. On the temporarily occupied peninsula, Russian air defense systems are being destroyed regularly and precisely. Sea routes to Crimea are largely blocked for the occupiers, as Ukraine's defense forces dominate the Black Sea even without having a traditional combat fleet. More on the prospects of liberating the Ukrainian peninsula in the report.
On December 20th, long-range drones from the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, struck the Belbek airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea. As a result of the attack, 2 Su-27 fighter jets were seriously damaged.
One of the aircraft was on the taxiway, fully armed and ready for a combat mission. It was destroyed. The estimated value of both aircraft is about $70 million. Additionally, the destruction of the control tower has been confirmed, which may complicate the organization of flight control at the airfield. SBU Press Service.
This is already the second successful SBU attack on the Belbek airfield in the past week. On December 18th, Ukrainian drones destroyed Russian equipment worth hundreds of millions of dollars, 2 Nebo SVU radars, a 92A6 radar from the S-400 Triumph air defense system, a Pantsir II air defense system, and a MiG-31 aircraft with a full combat load. Such systematic strikes on the peninsula have strategic significance.
Belbek and Crimea as a whole are important because, well, they belong to us and because they are close to the main part of Ukraine. Accordingly, the shorter the distance to the front line and to Ukrainian positions, the less you have to fly, and the harder it is for you to be detected in time. Understanding this, naturally, Ukrainian forces try to destroy all such military facilities, particularly airfields and aircraft stationed there, so that they cannot be used. The fewer radars there are, the worse Russian air defense can detect Ukrainian drones, which may be flying toward Crimea or, for example, toward Novorossiysk, where the Russian Black Sea Fleet base is located. Accordingly, the Russian army is essentially blinded by this without those very radars.
The fact that a radar station was destroyed during the December 18th attack is evidenced by the successful attack on the 20th, when air defense forces were essentially firing at the drones blindly. Back in 2021, Belbek was the most important Russian airbase in Crimea. Up to 46 Su-27 and Su-30 fighter jets from the 38th Fighter Aviation Regiment were stationed here. There was also a contingent of about a dozen Su-34 fighter bombers, several support aircraft and helicopters, numerous radars, and air defense systems. Now, almost all military aircraft have been removed from the peninsula, and those that remain are systematically being destroyed by the Ukrainian armed forces.
We can already talk about this Varshavyanka now. This is not the first loss of a Russian submarine in this war. They were indeed the first country following World War II to tragically lose a submarine in actual combat operations. And now, quite astonishingly, they have already suffered the loss of two, a truly significant and concerning development. For obvious reasons, the Russians haven't left anything valuable from their fleet in Crimea. The main reason the remnants of the Black Sea Fleet still exist is their mobility and stealth. In terms of mobility, this means constantly changing their anchorage. The ships are constantly being moved around the harbor or taken out of the base if they realize we're planning to strike. Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy.
Due to the lack of sufficient air defense and radar systems on the occupied peninsula, which the Ukrainian armed forces are systematically knocking out, the neighboring Krasnodar region, specifically Novoazovsk, is also suffering. That's where the remnants of the Black Sea Fleet are stationed. Recently, Ukrainian forces managed to seriously damage a submarine. Russia has become the first country in the world since World War II to lose a second submarine as a result of combat operations.
This is a very convenient location for knocking out Russian air defense assets. These are not only radar stations but also anti-aircraft missile systems. Even the radar for the unique S-500 was destroyed there. The work is being carried out methodically, and the enemy cannot help but defend the military facilities it has on the occupied peninsula. And they are forced to reinforce and replenish their air defense losses. Oleg Kotkov, military expert, editor-in-chief of Defense Express.
In addition to strikes with Ukrainian weapons, the armed forces of Ukraine are systematically hitting military targets on the peninsula with Western weapons, and no special permission is needed for this, since Crimea is internationally recognized as Ukrainian territory. Currently, Crimea is under the fire control of the defense forces. The Russian occupiers are simply forced to withdraw both ships and aircraft from the peninsula as their equipment is being systematically destroyed.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it, so more people can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. Russia's weekly spending on war now exceeds the annual budgets of 75% of Russian regions. In 2026, the Kremlin plans to spend almost one-third of the country's entire budget on its aggression. That is 3 times more than spending on economic development and 4 times more than funding for education and healthcare combined. Details next.
Putin spends weekly on the war, the annual budgets of 75% of Russian regions. The Moscow Times calculated that for the second year in a row, Russia's weekly spending on the war in Ukraine exceeds the annual budgets of most Russian regions.
The Russian budget is already facing serious problems. Moreover, according to the Russian side's own assessment, at this point the Russian economy is showing signs of so-called overheating. This is also evidenced by the decree of the government of the occupying country. First and foremost, this is the increase of VAT from 20 to 22%, which, accordingly, is a tax burden on small and medium-sized businesses. As a result of these decisions by the Russian government, there is already a wave of discontent among entrepreneurs. And the second point is the increase in the expenditure side of the budget by 6%. This is a very serious challenge for the Russian economy.
For their analysis, journalists used data on the budgets of the regions for 2022 through 2026, approved by local authorities, and compared these figures with expenditures in the national defense category of the Russian federal budget, which is now primarily made up of spending on conducting military operations in Ukraine.
As a result of actions by Ukrainian special services, specifically strikes on oil refining facilities, the Russian economy has suffered losses amounting to around $100 billion. These are colossal losses. And the third point is the National Wealth Fund. According to the Russian side's own estimates, during the so-called special military operation, it has been reduced by half.
It was explicitly stated that in the detailed calculations, the financial budgets of the temporarily annexed Crimean Peninsula and currently temporarily occupied territories.
It is important to note that when these calculations were performed and the final figures were compiled, the specific circumstances and conditions within the occupied regions of Ukraine were unfortunately not taken into full and proper account, leading to an incomplete representation of the overall situation. In fact, the funds allocated for targeted programs to restore infrastructure in the occupied areas of Ukraine do not actually reach their intended purpose. The age-old Russian problem is corruption and, accordingly, actual wastefulness.
In 2026, Russia's military expenditures will amount to 12.9 trillion rubles. This is almost 30% of the entire national budget and just slightly less than in 2025, when this figure was 13.5 trillion rubles.
Depending on the outcome of peace negotiations, the Russian Federation will either make amendments to the budget or look for additional sources of funding. It should be noted that they are facing very serious issues with finding additional sources of funding. This includes, for example, the situation around Venezuela, where oil was sold through Russian companies acting as intermediaries, and also the situation with Iranian oil products, where the Russian Federation has effectively lost the market for oil production and consequently the ability to influence sales.
The Kremlin dictator's spending on the war is 3 times higher than expenditures on economic development and 4 times higher than on education and healthcare combined. Accordingly, next year, for the majority of Russians, instead of studying or getting medical treatment, the only thing left will be to fight.
In the United States, transcripts of conversation between Putin and 43rd US President George W. Bush from 2001 were released. It turns out that even back then, the future dictator called Ukraine an artificial state and opposed our accession to NATO, claiming it could provoke a conflict between Russia and the United States. At the same time, Putin spoke about Russia's desire to become part of NATO and claimed that the Soviet Union had applied for membership back in 1954 but was rejected. This is almost a story about how someone with a fragile psyche could not handle rejection and turned into a bloodthirsty killer. Except here is not a person, it's an entire state. Still, such maniacs must be isolated and, if possible, treated. And finally, about a strike on one of the key sources of financing Russia's war. China and India refused to accept 20 tankers carrying Russian oil into their ports. How critical this is for the Kremlin? Find out in the report.
About 20 tankers carrying Russian oil are idling off the coasts of India and China as they're barred from ports for fear of United States sanctions. The United States has already seized several Venezuelan shadow tankers and is moving to confiscate them.
Maybe we'll keep the oil, maybe we'll sell it, or maybe we'll put it in the strategic reserve. We're keeping the tankers too.
How is the United States dealing with Venezuela right now? Any suspicious tanker carrying oil near the sovereign nation of Venezuela is to be immediately stopped and subsequently seized. We urgently need to fundamentally change the established rules and regulations for all tankers currently serving the Russian Federation, so that any vessel found to be carrying Russian oil with questionable, incomplete, or fraudulent paperwork can be promptly seized along with its entire cargo, without exception.
Beyond the territorial waters of coastal states, there is, and I'll emphasize this as the word might be new to them, freedom of navigation, which allows ships of any flag to be there.
In November, the United States sanctioned Russia's Lukoil, causing the price of Russian oil to plummet.
These are massive oil sanctions. We're talking about two of the truly biggest major oil companies in the world. They produce a significant amount of oil, and I sincerely hope this encourages Putin to be more sensible and thoughtful.
It's even dropping to $36 or $37 a barrel. This is a very bad situation for Russia, simply because their production costs are estimated at $45 to $50 a barrel. When you sell below that price, you're trading at a loss.
India then announced it could easily walk away from Russian oil.
India has diversified its supply sources, moving from buying oil from about 27 countries to around 40 countries now. Furthermore, if it's a question of buying from source 1 or source 2, we've been clear from the start, we'll buy from wherever we need to.
India would say they're opting out, but then reports would surface saying they weren't. So India was playing this game of yes, but also no.
Meanwhile, China stated they'd ignore the sanctions and keep buying from Russia.
Despite the turbulence in the international arena, China and Russia will remain committed to the spirit of eternal friendship, comprehensive strategic partnership, and mutually beneficial cooperation.
Despite their public claims that they will disregard the sanctions, China still genuinely wants to fully understand the significant potential risks involved in this complex situation.
But the truth is, both India and China benefit more from their ties with the United States. Even before the sanctions hit, Putin predicted they would actually work in his favor.
Just imagine. Let's say tomorrow they shut everything down, our gas, our oil, and so on. But the global economy won't withstand such a shutdown. Prices will simply skyrocket, and yet they'll still keep buying. It's impossible without it.
But oil prices didn't skyrocket, they collapsed dramatically. Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence services are systematically destroying tankers of Russia's shadow fleet, even though the Russian dictator continues to insist that everything is just fine.
And they'll shut down our oil. Well, at least shut it down somehow. Though they won't succeed in doing that. It's simply impossible, as a matter of fact, today. I don't think that this will affect us in any significant way. I mean, hundreds of thousands of sanctions have already been imposed, and we are where we are, as I've said. Last year, our economic growth was 4.3%.
For Russia, the shadow fleet is the backbone of its hydrocarbon export logistics. And a blow to this shadow foundation is essentially a blow to the ability to make money.
It turns out that every day of the war costs Putin too much, not only in human resources, but also economically. And what he can't earn from oil, the Russian dictator will take from the pockets of ordinary citizens.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. See you next time.